So I'm Whitney Doyle. I'm the Director of Government Relations here for the Amputee Coalition. I use she, her pronouns. Today I'm wearing my shoulder-length brown hair, the top part pulled back with light brown glasses. I'm also wearing a white t-shirt that says Amputee Coalition, though you can't see, and my background is a virtual background that says Inspire to Elevate. So welcome everyone to our session today. This is the Finding Your Voice Career Pathways Workshop. We are so excited to have you here to learn more about how you can be a part of the movement to change minds and hearts to support the limb loss and limb difference community. So I want to mention a few housekeeping things as we get started. First, as you scroll over your Zoom screen, a menu bar is going to pop up depending on what device you're on. It might be on the bottom of the screen or the top of the screen. That's where you're going to find the closed captionings for today's session. It's going to be in the More section, which is the 3 dots and More, and then you can click on the captions. That's also where you can see the chat feature and be able to raise your hand. So if you would like to speak whenever we get to the Q&A portion, you can do that through that menu bar. So if you are looking at your screen here, we have a couple of screen options. In the top right, you have the view button. If you're in the side-by-side gallery, there's going to be a bar in the middle. So you'll see our shared presentation, and then you'll see my image. You can actually move that bar left and right to make the shared screen smaller or larger, depending on your needs. If you have any technical issues, please use the chat feature. You can find that chat feature in that same 3-dot More menu bar. If you'd like to turn the chat feature off, you can do that by pressing Alt-H. For questions to our presenters, we want you to use the Q&A box on the menu bar. So please submit your questions there as they may get lost in the chat. And we're going to answer the Q&A portion throughout different sections of the presentation. So whenever you have a question, go ahead and throw it in there. And then when we get to that segment, we'll let you all know verbally. When we get to the Q&A, and if you'd like to make a comment or question verbally, you can do that by raising your hand, which is in that ..more menu bar. It could also be on the reactions tab on the menu bar, but you can do it if you're using keystrokes through Alt-Y or *9 if you're joining us by phone, and we'll let you know when you can mute and unmute to answer your question. Today's webinar is the 4th and final advocacy training that we're hosting during the month of April, which you all know is Limb Loss and Limb Difference Awareness Month. You can view the recording of the last 3 trainings on the Coalition's YouTube page. And with that, I am thrilled to have the pleasure of introducing our presenters today, Lucas DeLuca, Trinaya Reed, and Ryan Getty. And I'm going to turn the floor over to Lucas.
Hi, everyone. Whitney, I just wanted to quickly ask, just before we get underway, is there a way to provide video for the panelists? Currently says we cannot start video because the host has stopped it.
Yes,
if not,
one moment.
Okay, not a problem. Thank you.
Okay,
so,
you
folks,
should be able to do that now.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Hey, folks, my name is Lucas DeLuca. I am wearing a kind of salmonish color shirt today. I am happy to join you. We're going to be talking about Finding Your Voice Career Pathways Workshop. I'm joined by these lovely individuals, Whitney, Ryan, and Trinaya. We're very excited to talk about the different pathways we took to employment, and also to take the opportunity to talk with all of you about what experiences you may have had, and even with time on our side, going over a resume or 2 and talking about how to further tweak that work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump right in. And so just a little bit about today's workshop. It's meant to provide insight on many different pathways that you can take to find employment as a person with a disability. All of our speakers today are going to be providing their own experiences, opinions, and thoughts. It is important that I emphasize that these are individual experiences, opinions, and thoughts. The only expert here on our panel is our own workforce director. So with that said, please take everything we're saying with a grain of salt. Our experiences have worked for us, but they may not be exactly what works for everyone. So please note that the Amputee Coalition's Workforce Development Program is the next best step for you after your participation in today's webinar. There are so many exciting places and things to do there. In particular, we now have the ability to start booking appointments with Trinaya, to use the resume tool that we have there, and much, much more. So without further ado, I'm going to give you some background before we jump into our panelists and our questions. So why is today important, and why is it hard to get a job, and what does disability in the workforce look like? So as of 2023, roughly 40% of people with disabilities participated in the workforce, compared to 77% of people without a disability. So 37% is quite a gap. I will say that those numbers may seem very, very different, but it's important to know that in 2016, it was 20% of people with disabilities participating in the workforce. So in 7 years, we have seen a really sizable jump in getting people with disabilities into the workforce, into meaningful employment, and to thriving in their careers. It is important to say that some of this growth can be attributed to remote work opportunities as a result of the pandemic. And another large chunk of the change here can be that there is more assistive technology than there ever was before, which provides all of us an opportunity to engage in new and meaningful ways. So without further ado, I'm going to jump into welcoming our presenters. If you all don't mind hopping off of mute real quick and introducing yourselves, we'll get underway. And Whitney, we're glad to have you. And because you have some experience in this space as well, if you don't mind answering some questions and doing another brief introduction, we'll add you to our presenters panel if you don't mind. So Ryan, I saw you came off mute. I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Ryan Getty. I'm a right below knee amputee. I've got medium length brown hair. For a kind of quick visual description, I'm really happy to be talking to you all today. I work as a government relations specialist for the coalition. I graduated from UT Austin, and yeah, I'm looking forward to sharing with you my experiences today, answering any questions you might have.
Thanks, Ryan. Trinaya, you want to jump up next?
Hi, everyone. My name is Trinaya. I am the Workforce Development Manager here at the Amputee Coalition. I myself have a physical disability as well as being a wheelchair user. A little bit about my background. I have graduated from Temple University with my undergrad in political science and Spanish. And then I did move on to my master's program at the University of Central Florida, where I received my master's degree in public administration.
Thank you so much, Trinaya. And Whitney?
Yeah, go Knights. So I'm Whitney Doyle. As I mentioned, I'm the Director of Government Relations. I've been with the coalition for almost 2 months, a month and a half-ish, but I'm excited to be here. Previously, I was the Executive Director for the Florida Assistive Technology Act program. I was in that role for a little over 2 years, almost 3 years. And my original degree was in prosthetics, so I'm a certified prosthetist, but I got my master's in nonprofit management and have been in the nonprofit management and advocacy space for the last 8 years or so.
Thanks, Whitney. And my name, as I said, I'm Lucas DeLuca. I'm a right above knee amputee. I've been working with the Amputee Coalition now for almost 6 months. I am the Director for Community Engagement. What I'd like to do now that we've kind of done some brief introductions is jump into our panel Q&A. I'd like for anybody who's joining today, as we get closer to the bottom of these questions, throw some in the chat. We'll do our best to answer them as well. Most of our presentation today is meant to be an informal back and forth talking about our experiences. And the latter half of our presentation is meant to be a little bit more hands-on, looking at a resume or two, talking about some of our experiences and what we think work and what doesn't. So without further ado, I'm going to put all of our panelists back on the spot. I know you may have said what your job title is, but if you don't mind giving us a brief description of that job right now, that would be great.
I'll go first. So as a government relations specialist, I do a lot of managing of our government relations, as you would probably expect from the job title. As of right now, we're coming off of our Hill Day. That was the big event that we were planning for a long time. And then we're also really actively engaged with different coalition partners on things like the So Kids Can Move campaign and insurance fairness. Those are our two big campaigns right now.
Thanks, Ryan. Shreya?
So here at the AMPT Coalition, as the Workforce Development Manager, I oversee our Adult and Veterans Workforce Development Program, as well as our YEP Workforce Development Program. Very exciting. Both of these programs are new. The beginning of this month, on April 3rd, we launched our first program, which was our YEP Workforce Development Program, as well as our Workforce Development webpage for YEP. And then 2 weeks after that, we launched our Adults and Veterans Workforce Development Program, as well as our Workforce Development webpage, in addition to both job board platforms. So very exciting. I oversee a lot of our workforce development initiatives as far as reaching out to external employers and organizations about different employment opportunities for our participants, as well as hosting different webinars and trainings on workforce development, as well as different job-related topics for those with disabilities.
Thanks. Whitney, can I ask you to go next?
Absolutely. So as the Director of Government Relations, I oversee a team of Ryan and then also our colleague Dante. And what we're doing, a lot of what Ryan had said, but my position specifically is looking at the strategy of what the coalition needs to be thinking about regarding policy and legislative advocacy. So this is on the national space, but also in the state level space. So it's a lot of, figuring out where we need to be, what we need to work on, and then collaborating with our other colleagues at the coalition to see how we can use their work to educate legislators and policymakers and all of that kind of collaboration.
Thanks, Whitney. And as for me, as the Director of Community Engagement, some of the work that I end up doing has to do with volunteer management, volunteer service provision, things like the Certified Peer Visitor Program are under my purview. And there's just a lot to do in regards to collecting data and disseminating it so we can continue to improve our services to the community, hospital partners, you name it. I want to take this moment now that we've had our introduction out of the way, we've talked a little bit about what we're currently doing. And ask all our panelists if they would be comfortable sharing what they were doing prior to coming to the AC and what kind of skills they developed. So if you could just talk a bit about the fields you were in, if it all kind of lined up to your opportunity here, or if you don't feel like they did a little bit of different work. I'll let anybody who wants to tackle that first jump into that.
Well, I can jump in again if that's all right. So I guess not too long ago, I was in college. So that's really what I was doing not too long ago. But during college, I had, your standard food service type of things. And then after that, I worked for about a year at the Texas House of Representatives. That was kind of whenever I was getting further along in my senior year of my degree. And I knew pretty much what field I wanted to be entering into after graduation. So I got a job with a representative at the Texas House of Representatives. I'm based out of Fort Worth, Texas, if there's anyone from Texas in the chat today. And And at that job, I did a lot of policy research, primarily on tax policy, and did some health work as well, but a lot of tax policy and a lot of speech writing. I wrote a lot of the speeches during the time I was there that my boss, the representative, gave during that time. And I think that gave me a lot of really good experience. You know, I've always been interested in tax policy. It sounds like a boring field, but I think you know, it has a lot of impact on people's lives. So it was something that I was interested in, and I learned a lot about how the government works, sort of from an inside angle. I got to help constituents solve problems with different government agencies, which is not always easy. Even for someone that does it as a job, navigating the intricacies and labyrinthine maze of just regulation and agencies, and you know, you got to talk to this person to get to this person who's going to refer you to, you know, actually you should have been talking to X, Y, or Z federal program the whole time. So it gave me a lot of experience working with different organizations. And one of the ones that I worked the most often with was helping people actually with their healthcare, that they were using different state or federal healthcare programs and helping them out with that. And so that gave me a lot of experience whenever I came to the coalition. And of course, I was initially attracted to come to the coalition because of kind of my identity as an amputee. But I think that my experience working on the legislative side, working for the people that I kind of talk to now to try and convince them to make certain decisions or vote a certain way, gave me a lot of experience that is really valuable.
Thanks, Ryan. And I really appreciate learning that. I won't come to you about filing my taxes, but maybe about tax policy, definitely. I want to quickly say to everyone in the chat who shared some of their experiences so far, what your background is. Thank you. We love to see that. Continue to share your backgrounds in the chat. Trinea, do you want to go next?
Absolutely. So for my work experience prior to coming to the AC has mainly always been around assisting those with disabilities with employment. It's always been a passion of mine, specifically being a person who has a physical disability. You know, I understand the struggles that many had to endure when it came to employment, and, you know, having mentors and those guiding me along the way to kind of help me through that journey. I was super grateful for, still very, very grateful for. So for me, I wanted to give back and be able to be a mentor to those that might have been in the same situation as me, trying to find employment after college. So before I came to the AC, I worked for almost 4 years as an employment specialist for a nonprofit here in the Orlando area. So specifically, my role was being a one-on-one job coach for those with all various disabilities, going to interviews with them, teaching them how to write a resume, going to different employers and organizations and talking to them about the importance of hiring those with disabilities and increasing their DEI efforts. So very exciting to be able to have that experience, that hands-on experience with participants that may have not had a job before, or they've been out of the workforce for numerous of years, and then they were trying to get back into the workforce. Prior to that, while I was a student at Temple University during my undergrad, I worked very closely within higher education, within the Disability Resource Center there at Temple University. I was an intern there for a program called the Federal Workforce Recruitment Program. For those that are not familiar with the program, essentially, it's a government program that assists those with disabilities in finding either federal internships or federal employment, permanent employment. That was very, you know, inspiring for me, and such a great experience to be able to help those that were in college who had disabilities, just trying to find their way after college, or even while in college, trying to gain work experience. That experience for me, I think, opened up the door and the passion for wanting to continue on with workforce development and building that as part of my career. In addition to the federal workforce recruitment program that I oversee, I also helped create a program outside of that for the Disability Resource Center, a program called Career Gateway, which is very similar structure to what we have here at the Amputee Coalition with our workforce development program. Essentially, building out a program for participants with resume building, mock interviewing, holding different webinars and trainings to be able to prepare students who are in college with disabilities for when they transitioned out of college into the working world. So that was very exciting. And then kind of a little bit as far as from when I graduated from my graduate studies and I was finding employment before leading on to being an employment specialist. I worked for a number of years, kind of off related, not related, to working at Disney for a number of years. For those who know Disney, I'm a big Disney fan. I worked at one of the biggest theme parks on property and one of the biggest retail stores on property within sales and retail for a couple of years. So that's kind of been my employment journey. But as I mentioned prior, helping those with disabilities with employment and finding their career path has been something that's always been of interest to me.
Thank you so much. Whitney, I'll pass it over to you.
Thanks, Lucas. So it's really funny, Trinea. I actually went through the workforce recruitment program in college and worked for the Food and Drug Administration. Nobody ever knows about that program. You talk about it and it's like one of those hidden gems of employment resources for people. Yeah. So that was cool that you said that, because I wouldn't have even thought to mention that in my my previous work activity. So I had worked in food, a lot of fast casual restaurants, working registers, did a lot of that up until college. Worked for the Food and Drug Administration in college as the basically assistant to the assistant. So really learned a lot of organizational skills, doing kind of that administrative support role, which has been something that I've been able to build off of in every position after that. So I did work as a orthotics and prosthetics resident for about 2 years before I became a certified prosthetist. So patient care, learning about how health insurance works for all of us, as well as, what kind of documentation is needed, and then bedside manner, right? So customer service really is what I think ties into that, and how to treat people respectfully. And then after I was a certified prosthetist, I promptly changed my career path and went into the disability advocacy space, the broader disability advocacy space. I've done work as a financial administrator for a large nonprofit and really enjoy money management, and was able to learn firsthand what nonprofits have to worry about as far as tax exemption and fundraising and donors and all of that fun stuff. From there, I worked briefly for the Florida Chamber of Commerce, where I was helping them to run an internship program to get businesses in Florida to hire people who have disabilities, because as Lucas mentioned, the disparity between people being engaged in the workforce of people who have disabilities and people without is too big. So Florida specifically was looking at those numbers and trying to figure out what, as a business community, could be done. They also started looking at high school graduation rate of people who have disabilities and what businesses can do to become involved in getting people to graduate high school so they have that high school diploma or GED and then can move into employment that way. So that was a really cool experience. It taught me a lot about networking. And anyone you meet at any point can come back and be helpful, or someone to call on later on. And then from there, I ended up where I was before I came to the coalition, which is at FAST, which is the Florida Alliance for Assistive Services and Technology. I originally came on as their director of finance. again, love that money management. So I was helping them out with their finances, and really started to do these are all my paid roles, but I've done a lot of nonprofit board work, which has taught me a lot of skills for advocacy, because a lot of times when you're a volunteer of a nonprofit, you are the people that are doing the actual boots on the ground. So as you all know, if you volunteered with us at the coalition, you are doing a lot of the work that we are promoting. So with that, I've sat on the Association of Programs for Rural Independent Living's National Board. I've sat on the Commission for Rehabilitation Counselor Certification, their national board. Right now I'm sitting on the National Council of Independent Living's Finance Committee. Not a board member, but happy to help them with their finances. And also serving on the Florida Independent Living Council. So all of that kind of fed into the advocacy work that led me here today. But as executive director of FAST, which is where I was after I was a director of finance, taught a lot about, administration and operations of a nonprofit, which is why I got my degree in nonprofit management, my master's degree through UCF. Go Knights, charge on. And really helped me to see what it looks like long term, like what is a strategic vision of where an organization needs to be. So that was really cool, and a great opportunity, and also helped me with the hiring and the letting go of staff and learning that management and supervisor role.
Thanks, Whitney. I have to say to all of our guests today, I've learned more about my panelists just in this last 10-15 minute period than I think I have in the last few months of working with them. Very exciting for me. I will quickly share a bit about my background. I'm the artsy fartsy one of the bunch. I went and while I was doing my university degree in both education and the arts, I was acting professionally for a number of years. I ran a theater company. So while I was learning how to teach, because I saw gaps in the space of disability and education, I fell down a rabbit hole of wanting to be on stage and sing. And I think that has to do with having a musician for parents. But throughout all of those experiences and working in the education space, I found my way into disability advocacy, specifically in regards to education. So when it was time to say goodbye to my theater company and to the part-time acting gigs that weren't paying enough, it was an easy switch into helping people and being a part of this community in a much more active way. A lot of the things that I gained from that work, in particular the arts work, was a level of understanding people in managing large swaths of projects, directing 3 different shows at once in 3 different cities, learning how to manage a budget. What's really exciting is, as a congenital amputee, my experience from disability alone was such a vital part of applying to jobs and sharing what I felt made me different and special in the way that I thought about things. My adaptive spirit, I felt, applied to all these different areas. Long story short, the education arts background all followed me into the space around secondary education. I was the director of a community college accommodations office, and I did some really incredible work in COVID, just supporting folks who needed disability support for long COVID. Eventually I got here to the AC, and today I get to be talking about all of these amazing pathways that all of my fellow panelists have been a part of in regards to their journey. What I'm really excited about is I've already read in the chat so many of you sharing your pathway, and that education played a part in that. I don't have the statistic on me today, but I'm positive that folks with disabilities attend higher education at a higher level per capita than folks without disabilities. I'm almost positive of that statistic. Can't remember where I read it, but what it tells me is that we are a highly motivated bunch when it comes to getting involved. I want to jump to our next questions. We're going to kind of rapid fire this next one. So for my panelists, I just want to quickly say, what do you believe is the most important skill or trait to have when applying for a job as a person with a disability? Just name one, just rapid fire through. Give a little bit of rationale, but we'll keep it tight so we can get to our next question as well.
I'll go first on this one. This is Whitney. I'm going to say creativity, creative thinking, right? For us who have disabilities, we're often thinking outside the box on how we can do whatever we want to do in our day-to-day life. And I think that's a huge skill and trait that we uniquely can bring to the workforce.
I'll jump in. I think the most important trait, and I think this goes whether or not you have a disability or not, but maybe we have it in a different degree than the general population, is tenacity. I think you have to have the tenacity and kind of the strength of will to just keep applying and keep applying yourself until you get what you need. And I think that's a skill that we generally develop at a higher rate than potentially the able-bodied population.
How dare you take my resiliency topic? I was going to go for that one.
I would say the most important is being positive and having confidence, whether that's applying for jobs or during the interview process. Sometimes that process could be very challenging. Also frustrating when you're applying for multiple jobs and you might not hear back, or you think, yeah, I did really well during this interview, and then you find out that you don't get the job. I think the most important takeaway from that is to realize, okay, what is something that I could have done differently? Or what's something that I could have, said that might be better for a next interview? Or, is my resume structured the way that it needed to be for a particular job position? So not to feel discouraged about the process, but being positive. And even though a situation might not turn out to be the way you wanted, or, you didn't get the job or that interview, that you could say, well, you know what, I tried, I went out there, and I'm going to do better the next time, or I know next time it's going to be a more positive outcome.
Thanks, panel. I feel like Ryan already tackled mine. So what I want to do is I want to save time for question 4. What we won't do right now is we won't go to question 5, just so we have time to go through the resume, talk through some other exciting developments. But this will be our last panel Q&A question, and then we'll get into some of the workshopping pieces and insight pieces that our panelists have around resumes, etc. So what I'd like to do right now is I'd like to ask the panel one last question. And this question is one that I struggled with quite a bit. As a congenital amputee, I never felt the need to disclose my disability. Some of us have that, I will call it a privilege. Others will, not have that option. Sometimes you have to disclose. I want to talk about, to all of our panelists, about what it means to disclose or not to disclose. And I want to have this opportunity to also just say that the way we talk about disability is important. When we say disclose, it can seem like we have to say something or tackle something in a way that is inherently an accommodation related item. I'm going to disclose my disability because I need to talk about what I need or a challenge I may have. You can choose to disclose your disability because it makes you a better applicant. That's a really exciting part of this puzzle. How you choose to disclose and if you choose to disclose is up to you. And so I'm going to turn it over to our panelists now to talk about what that experience has meant for them. And so panelists, if you can just say what your experience has been with disclosure and any tips for those who are beginning to self-advocate or share disability in the workforce.
So I'm also a congenital amputee. I have unilateral fibular hemimelia. So I feel like I have a similar experience to you, Lucas, in the sense that I have never felt a strong need to disclose. The only job actually I've ever mentioned anything about being an amputee is this one, actually, because like you said, I felt like it would actually kind of be a boon for me to mention that. And the work that I had done previously, working with other amputees, in not through the Amputee Coalition's Peer Visitor program, but through a similar program, kind of like that. I did not choose to. I typically don't choose to disclose anything about using a prosthetic or being an amputee unless I feel like it's going to be relevant. Because kind of like what you said, I feel like if I was to put a line on my resume that said just like, just so you know, I'm an amputee or something, I feel like that would, and it really just depends on who's going to read it. But the problem is you don't know who's going to read it because you don't know the person that's going to read it. And I always felt like it was a little bit like it almost implied that I needed some accommodation, even though I know that I really don't need any accommodations. And I'm probably, more physically capable than a lot of, working age people. So that's one of the reasons why I typically choose not to mention it unless I'm talking about my kind of experiences working with programs related to working with people with limb loss or limb difference. And I think that's worked out well for me so far. And then also it's an important part of my identity, but I don't see it as maybe the most key thing to know about me for the sake of employment in general. So typically I just like to use that space on my resume for one of my other accomplishments, like that could be a line that I use to talk about my involvement, with volunteering or something else. And so, just for space, a lot of times I just think it's not the most relevant thing to put.
I really appreciate you sharing that, Ryan, mostly because I think it's a really stark contrast to my resume and you saying that like you don't have it on there. We're both congenital amputees. We both approach this very similarly, but one of the top things on my resume is it says amputee creative educator, and I spell it out. And so I think, again, it is such a personal decision. And like you said, you bring so much to the table in regards to those achievements. You want to highlight those other items. And on my resume, I think there's a part of me that says, well, I want to highlight this moment or these moments in my life that I believe have defined or helped me achieve those things. So it's this really interesting balance. I'm so glad you shared that, mostly because I think it really draws that spectrum that we were just talking about. Whitney or Trinea, can I talk?
I could go next. So my experience with disclosing my disability. So my situations have been unique in that I have a physical disability and that I'm a wheelchair user. So that, in times where I did go in for interviews, I feel like I have disclosed my disability before actually saying that I have a disability due to my disability being visible. I would say I've been very grateful as far as, being able to kind of talk about my disability and disclosing my disability to my previous employers, and that a lot of my employers that I've been with in the past, they focused on diversity, they focused on DEI efforts and embracing hiring those with disabilities. So for me, I felt comfortable being able to share my experience, not only because they see that I have a disability already or that I'm a wheelchair user, that I could feel comfortable disclosing to an employer that says, well, you having your disability is not a disability, it's actually an ability. It's a unique ability. So being able to showcase and, provide that and disclosing that information to them, for me, has been very positive. I know for some, that might have not been the case. So I would say an advice that I would give to others is, disclosing your disability is a personal choice. It's not something that you have to do. But if you feel that you need to disclose your disability, during an interview process, so that way you're able to have a certain accommodation so you could be successful during that interview, I say definitely, because if it's going to make you stronger in that interview and being able to showcase your best self, absolutely. In addition to once you're getting a job offer, I know for me, if I got a job offer for any of the other jobs that I've been to in the past, I would disclose my disability, whether it's, if I needed, an office that was ADA accessible, or if I needed a desk that was accessible for my wheelchair, whichever the case may be, because I knew at that point, yeah, it could be awkward having those conversations with a manager or supervisor that you might not know because you're just starting. But I knew for me, the importance is having what I needed to be able to be successful long term, and not saying, well, I don't want to disclose, and then weeks in or months in, and I don't have that certain accommodation that I need, and my work is lacking or my productivity is lacking. So for me, being able to disclose early to be able to have the accommodations that I needed, I felt was very valuable for me to be successful long term at my job.
Thanks. Again, I want to share that is such a timely topic. I know I saw that same comment in the chat. I'm just so glad that you were sharing your experience there and what it means to occupy that space, because again, limb difference is a spectrum and we all come to it in a different way. I'm so glad that you were able to share what that looks like for you. Whitney, I'll pass the torch.
Thanks, Lucas. So for me, I think disclosure in job applications is very similar to disclosure in online dating profiles, but dating disclosure will be another conversation, another webinar that we'll let Lucas and his team lead. But for me, I think a lot of my resume speaks to my disability engagement because I've chosen a career path in the disability space. So a lot of my jobs and volunteer work are all in the disability space. So depending on the position, I may reference in a cover letter my disability, but more so in the sense of, I'd say, as a 8th generation disabled female, if I'm describing myself. So I don't go into the detail of how my disability could be an asset or whatnot. I more so use it as a descriptor of myself in a cover letter more so than in the resume. However, having a physical disability, you can't, or I cannot hide it. I don't have an arm, so that's much harder to hide than not having a leg, which I also don't have. But there have certainly been situations where I've needed to sit during long restaurant shifts, or needed to use my manual wheelchair if I was having issues with my socket. And truthfully, it's not always stuff that I've asked for formal accommodations for, especially if it's a desk job or if it's at a restaurant, and knowing that you have the right to break certain amount of hours, and knowing, what your job, the essential functions of that job are, and how you can work within them without necessarily needing accommodation. However, I've done left-handed keyboard accommodations, and I've asked for that. I've asked for separate number pads from the keyboards for that as well. I've asked for standing desks, right? Or sitting on bouncy balls, because those to me are all accommodations of being able to sit comfortably or stand comfortably to work at a desk job, remote or in person, truthfully. But I also have a learning disability. So I have an intellectual disability of audiovisual comprehension. So I don't always read things off a page very well. Of course, the older you get, the more experience you have reading. So it's gotten easier and easier. When I did my master's, I didn't have to ask for an accommodation. However, in my bachelor's degree, I did. So that's something that I typically don't disclose, but I may ask for additional time or clear expectation of time. And I know to manage my time to accommodate my work. However, asking for access to a calculator in school or asking for additional time with things was accommodations I've used previously and stuff I just kind of work into the process through my job. So I don't know that I've ever formally asked for an accommodation. I just kind of ask for things as I need them when I go.
Thank you, Whitney, so much for sharing your experience with that. And I think also it is timely given some of the questions that have come in. So what I would like to do is I'd like to ask Trinea, if you don't mind, we've got a question from Vaughn that asks, at what point is disclosure necessary? Phone interview, Zoom interview? If you do need accommodations, would it be more valuable to disclose early? Do you mind tackling that question and maybe providing some context?
Sure, absolutely. So I think, especially within the workforce realm and going through a pandemic, the workforce space has changed drastically as far as, hybrid schedule, remote work, working in an office, even the interviewing space as far as whether an interview is held on Zoom versus in person. So I said, I would say, it's based more on your comfort level. Kind of as I was mentioning previously, like for myself, if you feel that there's an accommodation that you're going to need during an interview, definitely disclosing that, before the interview. Normally before interviews, you'll get like a generated email from like human resources that will say, if you need any ADA accommodations, please let us know. So they're gratefully saying, hey, we want to make this experience the most comfortable for you. We want to make this interview experience the best. So that way you could bring your best self to the table. So I think kind of using that moment, if it's something that that you would need during an interview, maybe just writing an email back, hey, I might need an ASL interpreter, or I might need another accommodation to be able to be successful during the interview. So what I always like to say is when having those conversations about disclosure and needing an accommodation, like during the interview process, maybe talking about or giving a little blurb on how it's going to benefit you to have that accommodation. So, okay, I need an ASL interpreter to be able to express my needs or be able to express my experiences better, to be able to bring my best self to the interview. So that's one way I would recommend is maybe that having that disclosure, through an interview, through email, if it's something that you need, before the interview process or during the interview process. Now, once you get the job offer, you normally have like an orientation or a one-on-one with a manager or supervisor, and they normally would say, is there anything that you need to be more successful at your job or to be more comfortable at your job? And that could be an open dialogue as well, to have that conversation with your supervisor to say, hey, kind of like as Whitney mentioned, as far as having a standing desk. Hey, for me, having a standing desk would be beneficial because if I'm a wheelchair user, being able to have an adjustable desk is going to be able to help me to be able to access my computer better, or be able to be more eye level if I'm working at a computer doing video calls. So kind of spinning it in a way that an accommodation is not something that's negative. This is something that's going to help me to be better at my job and to bring my best self at the job.
That is, I think, probably one of the best descriptions that I've heard in regards to advocating for yourself and what it means to not only improving your comfort, but improving the work that's coming out. And so I think that with that, I want to wrap us there in regards to the panel Q&A. Don't think we can ask for a more natural and great place to just take a pause. I know that there was some questions in the chat in particular about different types of accommodations, things of that nature. I want to say if we were going to go through all the different types of accommodations today, that in and of itself could be another webinar. I would recommend that you reach out to Trinea and the Workforce Education Department. You can set up an appointment with her and just have that conversation in a one-on-one setting where we can tailor that information to you in a much more personal way. What I would like to do is we're going to talk a little bit about a resume review. I've included my personal hero, Hiccup Haddock from How to Train Your Dragon, one of the few, and in my opinion, one of the best examples of disability representation in film and media. I don't know what that says, that it's coming from an animated movie, but we'll take that in stride and we'll continue to roll with it. I have created a example resume to review today that is related to Hiccup. We know that some of you found time to send in resumes to us. We'd like to go over those as well. So I'm going to quickly look up and pull up Hiccup's resume. But just before we do that, I want to show you all that our workforce development department at the Amputee Coalition has some phenomenal new resources. So let me click this link. Hopefully it takes us to where we need to be. If not, I will stop sharing. I'll bring us back and I will jump into the screen that we need to make this work. Perfect. Now let me just do this, share my screen, get it together, and perfect. This is what I want. Can you all see the fact sheet screen that's sharing now? Excellent. So folks, I will post this link in the chat for all of you. This is on the Amputee Coalition's website. It's a part of our workforce development work. There are resume templates here. There are sample resumes. There are examples of cover letters and sample cover letters that you can just sample from and use. Also, as noted, you can take some of the time of the lovely Miss Reed and you can have a conversation with her specifically about your resume and the work you do. What I'd like to do right now is I'm now going to stop sharing this screen. I'm going to throw up quickly Hiccup's resume. We're going to look at it at best for 5 minutes or so. And then we'll try to get into some of the other examples that we have today. I know we're a little bit under the gun on time, so we're going to try to be proactive about getting this on through. So if I'm able to share my screen here, everybody seeing this resume for Mr. Hiccup Haddock? I'm going to zoom in a bit. So everybody got that? Excellent. So I had a little bit of fun with this. Please excuse my love for the movie How to Train Your Dragon. As you can see here, educator, dragon rider, amputee. He's very proud. I would like to say that one of the first notes, as someone who looks over resumes often, one of the first thing that comes to mind is what email is provided. I love this, that this says toothless forever. However, it may not be the most professional email address to be sending people to. So take a moment and as you review your resume, make sure you have things like the most appropriate or readable email attached. Some other items in here include that in the experience portion, you're not simply saying what you're doing, you're providing numbers behind what you're doing. It's really easy when you're writing up a resume to say, I've worked with many people. What does many mean to the person looking over your resume? I have worked with thousands of people. While I appreciate the number, that's also a really hard thing to quantify. So think about how you're throwing numbers into your resume and how effective it is in getting across the points you want to. We're going to scroll down past Drake University and his time at Burke University as a student teacher in Norway. And we're going to look at the education section. You do not need to include at all times a large list or description about what your education was. In fact, this is a 2-page resume. Sometimes that is too much. I will say that having sat on committees, when somebody sends in a 5-page cover letter and a 3-page resume, it is not as endearing or as motivating as you think it is to the hiring committee to select you. You may be a highly skilled candidate, but that is time. And for folks who have to go through these, we are not always going to be able to dedicate all of that time to going through a 5-page cover letter, a 3-page resume. What I will say is that what works great if you're going to have a education piece here, if it's a unique education degree, like instead of education, this was dragon education, maybe you'd want to explain what that is. So maybe if it's unique enough, you need to explain it. But what's important is if you've got honors or awards, this is a great place to include them. You can make sure you put that inside of that section. And then lastly, there are some pieces here around volunteer leadership, etc. We won't go into a ton of the details today, but I want to ask our panelists here, since I've just been talking through our friend Hiccup, if there's anything that you find important in resumes as a general rule of feedback outside of some of the things that are listed here, or maybe you saw something that struck you.
One rule that I always try to follow, and this is, I think, this can very quickly become not the case as soon as you start having a more long and illustrious career like Hiccup here. But for me, I always tried to keep my resume strictly to 1 page. Just because I've been told, and so much of it is kind of this like, I don't know, like astrology of the hiring manager, right? Where you're trying to figure out like who you're talking to and how much they're really going to like read what you say. And so just to kind of combat that and the fact that, I'm relatively young and don't have a ton of, super impressive things to list anyway. I always try and keep it to just 1 page, because then I know that there's a good chance that they'll actually read it all. And I try and put my most impressive things up front. So I don't know if that's true. That's worked for me in terms of, but Trinea probably honestly has way better advice for that sort of thing than I do.
No, that's definitely great, Ryan, and Lucas as well. From my experience, looking at resumes, helping folks build resumes, keeping it to 1 page is ideal. A lot of recruiters that I've spoken to recently and in the past, they get so many hundreds of resumes a day, that, they can't go through all of them, or they can't go through them in its entirety. So to be able to kind of narrow it down to 1 page and making sure that you have bullet points in there for, each job position that you had, and making sure that it tailors to that job that you're applying for. I think that's super important. A lot of us, even myself in the past, you have one general resume, but it's important to whatever job you're applying for to make sure you're really looking over that job description of that job that you're applying for, and making sure that you have bullet points in that resume that coincides with that job position. Very, very important. Another thing, like Lucas mentioned, is your email. So not to have a long email or an email that might come off as being offensive. Even if you have multiple emails, just creating just a simple Gmail that you use just for your employment search and for your application process. Your first name and your last name at gmail.com. Or, if they don't have that available, because sometimes, Gmail, they might not have your name and first name, last name. Even a trick that I found that be helpful was putting like Mrs. So Miss Trinea Reed at gmail.com, Mr. Ryan Getty at gmail.com. Something that's very simple and simplistic. So that way the recruiters is looking at your email like, I don't know about this candidate, even though you could be the best candidate in that pool. Little things like that, such as your email, could say, I don't know if I'm going to call them for an interview or I should move forward. Also things such as simple as your address. So when you're listing your address on a resume, that's important as well. I always tell folks that, you know, you don't have to list your whole address on your resume. You could put Orlando, Florida, or you could put Dallas, Texas. So that way you're not limiting yourself to a certain locale. So if you're applying for jobs that might be 30 or 45 miles away from where you live, a recruiter might pick a candidate that's closer because they might say, well, Lucas, you know, that might take him a long time to get to work, or he might be late. So I'm going to pick a candidate that's closer, even though Lucas might be the most, you know, prominent person or the most ideal candidate for that job. So, you know, little things like that, that's on top of your resume, your email, your address, you know, just to keep an eye out for those things. As well as, you know, like I think Lucas had it on Hiccups resume, is just having, you know, your LinkedIn, you know, URL for LinkedIn. A lot of recruiters go on, you know, your LinkedIn profile as well to see your experience that you've had. So including that is also very vital.
Definitely. I want to first off tell all of you in attendance today, thank you for being with us. We are so excited to have you, to have this opportunity to talk through this topic. Boy, do I wish we had 3 hours for it. It feels like we were still moving at a clip and we couldn't get through even maybe half of the things we wanted to. So I will say that there will be more conversations like this at the AC. We will be tackling these topics, but I want to let those of you who submitted resumes for us to review today, we are going to be setting up one-on-one sessions with you so we can tackle those. The last thing we want is for you to feel like, I submitted this resume, I wanted to talk about it today and we didn't get to it. So don't worry, we see you, we appreciate you doing that, and we will absolutely be in touch to work on those together shortly. For the rest of you, thank you for joining us. The Amputee Coalition is happy to have you in attendance. And if you need anything at all, check in with the workforce department. We are doing some really incredible things there. A huge thank you to our panelists, and have an amazing day.
Thank you, Whitney, and thank you, Lucas and Trinea. Have a good day, everybody.
Thank you.